Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today's session of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Commonwealth Real Estate transaction process. I'm joined by Lisa McCarthy, who's an office manager in the Winchester office and in multiple locations. She's going to be assisting in the process. And today she is going to cover everything you need to know when it comes to putting a transaction under agreement, which includes a listing and also a sale. From here, I'm going to hand it over to Lisa. It's all yours.
Thanks, Jimmy. Welcome, everybody. We'll just go right into it. I have a number of slides that we'll go through, and then if you have questions during one of the slides, feel free to mention it in the chat and we'll be alerted with it. And there will also be an opportunity at the end to ask questions. So with that, we'll get started. The main message in this presentation is that we are trying to make sure that every new agent understands that the agent and the office administrator are working together in order to get your property to close. The agent is out in the field doing the hard lifting, where you're negotiating the contracts, you're getting things signed, you're getting your smoke certificates. Meanwhile, the office admin inside is making sure that your paperwork is getting done and it's properly signed off on, and that we're getting things ready for closing. So with that, the agent and the office administrator will have a number of different touch points. The paperwork that you are receiving, whether it's the executed listing paperwork or offer paperwork or P&S, those are all going to be following the path within Dotloop. And so you'll put that into Dotloop and the office administrator will see it upon you submitting it. The process is very, very helpful when an agent is filling out the new listing checklist or the new sale checklist, depending on where you are in the transaction. And we'll touch upon that further in a few slides. Your office administrator is going to review your paperwork. They're going to order the sign through the Trackwell company, which is a third-party vendor. They're also going to ready your marketing material and create the commission statement and what we call the AD, which is short for the agent disbursement, sometimes known as the financial side. The office admin is also working with our accounting office, which is located at the Regional Support Center in Natick, in order to get closing checks processed. One thing that we also want to make sure that new agents are doing is bookmarking the commonresources.org to your browser. That is going to be your key launching pad to get to any of the Berkshire Hathaway Commonwealth sites. And so it's an easy way just to make your life easier. We ask that if this is a relocation deal that you're doing, that you're keeping the relocation department in the loop, per se, by giving them the executed paperwork within 24 hours of it being signed. And lastly, we want to make sure that you are using the commonmoves.com email address that you've been assigned in order to do all of your real estate business. This is the best way of communicating. It's the safest way of communicating. And we want to make sure that we're helping you enforce that on your end. You're going to hear me say the office admin or administrator a number of times during this presentation. There is an easier way of identifying those people. You'll know their names and you can send them an email directly. But we also like to have things go towards the more generic name for the office. For example, here on top, the Belmont office agents can communicate with the Belmont agent or the Belmont admin through belmontadmin@commonmoves.com. So I support Winchester, and my agents go winchesteradmin@commonmoves.com. And that's a good way of just making sure that you're hitting not only your office admin, but that person's backup in the event that they're not there. At the bottom of this slide, I just want to point out also the relocation@commonmoves.com. So that's the way you're going to reach out to that group when you are dealing with a relocation situation. There are other webinars available to you to teach you how to use Dotloop. What I want to stress with you today is that when you have paperwork and we talk about you communicating with your office admin, the way you're going to let your office admin know that the paperwork is ready for their review is by clicking on the documents that you want to submit. And then on that top right-hand area where I have circled submit for review, you're going to click on that. That is going to bring your office admin into the loop and let them know that you have paperwork that needs to be reviewed. And we want to make sure that all the paperwork is there. We want to make sure that it's also filled in correctly and signed. Okay. We're going to jump right into the list side of the transaction. The list side is a little bit more complicated, and that's why I want to lead with that one first. As the listing agent, that makes Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Commonwealth the escrow agent, and we're responsible for the monies that we are holding in escrow. So it brings a different level of responsibility for all of us, and we want to make sure that we are properly using the systems that we have in order to get us there. So when you have a new listing, you are going to submit for review all of your listing signed paperwork along with the new listing checklist. And I'll show you that in a couple moments, a couple slides. That you've got something new that's coming to the market. So the other two things that are going to come along with that is that you're going to want to request a sign to be installed, and it will be important for you to distinguish whether or not you want it to be a regular sign or a luxury sign. And if you have questions on that, you can let your office admin know. But you're also going to be submitting a form for your marketing request. Not all office managers need you to fill out the form, but there needs to be some communication between the two of you in order to understand what it is that you need in order to market your property. If it's a luxury property, it brings another level of seriousness to the equation. But we always want to put our best foot forward and make the best marketing for you. And so the best way of doing that is for you to let us know when you've got a listing and give us ample time to get the marketing material prepared for you. Then you have your next exciting point of the transaction. When you get an accepted offer, you're going to submit that paperwork for review in Dotloop, and you're going to do the new sale checklist. And again, I'll mention that in a couple of slides. But that's going to be a key point of the transaction, because that's really when we're turning to our accounting software and we're entering all of the details that we know about this new transaction. And you're going to have an offer check that you're going to need to hand to your office admin. And currently we have close to 30 offices within the area. So if you are not in your home office, you can drop it off at whatever office is easier for you. Keep that in the back of your mind. Your office admin will be communicated with, and we work together to make sure we know when it's the right time to deposit. The next stage of the transaction is the P&S stage. And so when that P&S document is finalized, you need to submit it for review to your office admin. You're also going to have the P&S check, and that also needs to be deposited, and you need to give it to your office admin. And again, you have an option of which office is closest to you, but you want to make sure that the P&S and the P&S check are as close together in timing when they are turned in. How am I doing with speed, Jimmy?
Good.
Okay.
You're great.
I'm a little crowded on this slide because I made an adjustment since yesterday. So about 2 to 3 weeks before a transaction is going to be going to closing, you will see that the office administrator is going to be getting a few things ready. But one of the things that we ask the agent is that if anything key is being changed, is there a concession on the sale price? Is the closing date changing? Has the commission structure changed? Those are really key pieces of information that will change how we do your commission statement and how we do your AD, that agent disbursement. So make sure you let your office manager or office admin know when that happens. So the office administrator is going to prepare that AD, and they're going to electronically send that to you through Dotloop for your signature as well as your sales managers. When you receive that, we want to make sure that you're taking a look at it and you're understanding it and you're in agreement with how the money is being dispersed. I don't want you to sign it unless you're sure. So if you need to have a conversation with your office admin, make sure you are comfortable with how the monies are done. Make sure that the commission structure is right. Make sure that the plan is correct. Make sure the closing date is correct. Those are key things on the AD that you want to make sure are submitted correctly. So upon that document being approved by you and the sales manager, then that will go to the accounting office. And that's when the office administrator will tell accounting in Natick that they need to ready the checks for closing. So it could be just a co-broke check, it could be just an excess escrow check, or both. The other thing that we're doing at that moment is we're also getting you your commission statement. Now, some offices do things slightly different, but we're generally giving you this commission statement within 2 to 4 weeks before the closing. If you need it earlier, just ask your office administrator to give it to you earlier. Some attorneys look for it a little bit earlier in the process. Before we leave this column, I also want to mention each of the Commonwealth offices might be doing this slightly different, but we need the W-9 for situations where there is a co-broke. And sometimes the office administrator already has that because we keep a running supply on our shared drive for that. But if we are looking for the W-9, sometimes the office admin will go and get it themselves, or they'll ask the agent to do it. So that's going to be left up to your particular office, and you'll learn rather quickly on that. As you get closer to the actual closing date, the agent is going to ask for the sign to come down. And so that gets requested by the office admin to Trackwell. Again, it's a third-party vendor, and they will get the sign taken down. Trackwell can run anywhere between 3 days to a week, 3 business days to a week to do their installations. Removals tend to be a little bit faster than that because it's less work for them. On closing day, the agent needs to give the closing disclosure to the office administrator. Sometimes that's by hand, sometimes that's by email, or by submitting it for review in Dotloop. There could be a closing check that's necessary if we still have, if we were short with what we were carrying in escrow. So that check would be handed to the office admin. We're also asking the accounting department when the transaction is closed and on record, we're asking the accounting office to close the transaction in the accounting software. And that readies your commission statement or your commission check. There are 2 ways of doing that. There's direct deposit, which we are highly recommending. And there is also there are some people who still like checks, and that check will be sent to your home office, and the home office admin will tell you when it's arrived. So you're relying on the US Post Office in that regard. So if you want to get paid more efficiently, the best way of doing that is by direct deposit. So I want to backtrack just a little bit. We talked about the new listing checklist, and this is what the form looks like. It can be found in the templates in Dotloop, and you will use this form to tell key information to your office admin about this new listing. So key things would be the address, the seller name, the seller email address, what the commission structure is going to be, if it's a relo, just so that we can have it on our mind that this is something that's going to need relocation involved in. And if you wonder what forms are needed for your listing paperwork, there is a section on the bottom of the form that tells you which form is necessary. So some of them are just if they're applicable, but most of them are needed, and you will need to have those signed by the seller. I'm going to flip now to the new sale checklist. So this is needed anytime your listing has a accepted offer, or if you have a buyer who has an accepted offer. This checklist will tell your office admin when you submit the offer paperwork what the address of the property is, who the seller and buyer are, as well as the MLS number. We also want to know what your client's email address is, because that email address is going to be put into our system, and upon the transaction being closed in our accounting software, that will kick off Real Satisfied. A survey will be sent to your client asking how you did as an agent, and that's going to be very useful for you for testimonials for your own marketing material. So we want to make sure that we have that email address. Other things that are going to be labeled in here are the commission structure, whether or not it's a relo deal, if there is, who the co-broke is, and what agent and office you are working with on the other side. And if you are going to be paying one of the Berkshire Hathaway Commonwealth agents any kind of monies. This might come up for you if, say, somebody is helping you do something, like an agent is asking another agent to handle a smoke certificate test. If they're not physically able to do it, they call in a friend who's an agent, and they are there. They might say, for your time and effort, I want to thank you with $100, for example. You are the agent who is making those decisions. So I'm just giving you that as an example. I don't want you to think that it needs to be that amount or more or less. That's just an example. You may ask what forms are necessary when you are submitting your paperwork for your offer, your accepted offer. And those forms, again, are on the bottom of the checklist. So you can see that we're pointing to them there. Not all of them are applicable, but most of them are. So we want to make sure that those are the forms that you're getting signed by both parties and submitting through Dotloop. I'm going to quickly mention the sale side of the transaction. As I mentioned earlier, the sale side is less work on our part, but we still have the same goal in mind. We want to make sure that the property, that the transaction is ready for close, and that we get you paid in a timely fashion. So you are going to open up a loop in Dotloop with the address of your property. Up until that point, Mr. and Mrs. Smith may have their own loop with their names on it. But once you know what property they are going to be purchasing, we'll ask that you name that loop with that property address, so that that information is all together in that address for the future reference. So you'll submit your paperwork, your offer paperwork, then you'll submit your purchase and sale paperwork. 2 weeks or more before the closing, you'll need to make sure that you let your office admin know if anything key is changing. Like we said before, if the commission structure changes, if there's a concession on the sale price. So those are really, or if the closing date has changed. Those are all key things to make sure your office admin is aware of. So the office admin will generate the AD, that agent disbursement. You'll need to review it again. The sales manager will review it and you'll both sign off on it. That will travel through Dotloop. And we'll be giving you a commission statement. One thing that I didn't mention through the list stage, and I'll just take an opportunity to mention it here, that commission statement, some office admins will send it to you just through email, and some office admins send it to you through email and put it in Dotloop. It really is just something that is a personal preference from the office admin, but you can, you'll get a feel of that as you go along, and if you have a preference, you can also try communicating that. Lastly, the closing disclosure on when the property is closed and goes on record is going to be given by hand, by email, or through Dotloop to the office administrator. You're going to give the office administrator the closing check that comes from the co-broke or the closing attorney. And again, you don't have to bring that to your home office. You can do it at another site depending on where you're located. And that office admin will communicate with your office admin. We want to make sure that we understand when it's closed, and then the office administrator will take that closing check and the closing document and work with accounting to close that out in the accounting software. And again, direct deposit is best, but we also do hand checks. So the hand check will be cut in Natick and sent to your home office, and we'll let you know when we receive it. So let's just take a pause here. How are we doing with?
We're doing great, and I just wanted to stress the goal at the Regional Support Center, which is in Natick, as Lisa mentioned, is to process all transactions as quickly as possible. You just have to remember sometimes, it depends on the time of the season. As we get into the spring season and into the summer season, it is very busy. We're talking hundreds of transactions that we're processing. So just make sure that everything is correct, because we don't want it going back and forth and delaying the process. Our goal is to process everything as quickly as possible at the Regional Support Center in Natick. So just wanted to stress that. Question?
And that can only be done if we have all our paperwork in place. So that's why the partnership between the agent and the office admin is so important.
Very important, very important.
So this is a slide that we don't necessarily want to talk about, but from time to time, there are deals that fall through, whether it's right after the offer or right after the PNS. So it's important, if you are the listing agent, it's very important that you are using our release of deposit form. That is not something that the co-broke agent is going to be being privy to. So the minute you understand a deal is falling apart, you need to, I would recommend you fill out this release of deposit form for them and have it sent through the co-broke for signatures on their side. And so there are important details here that need to be filled in and filled in correctly. So I'm going to just list them here for you. You're going to want to make sure that you're referring to the PNS. If the transaction has gone to PNS, that's the document that you're going to refer to when you're filling in the names of the seller and the buyer and the amount the escrow for the escrow check and the date and the property name. So there are a number of things that we want to make sure we're grabbing from that. If we haven't gone to PNS yet, then you just need to rely on the offer. But the offer and the release of deposit has to match. As specific as it is with the person's name, that's how it needs to appear on the release of deposit. So you're identifying the escrow monies and who the monies are going to. You are going to, if we are the escrow agent, you need to fully complete our name in there. You can't do it short for Berkshire Hathaway. It must say Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Commonwealth Real Estate, or a shorter version of BHHS Commonwealth. It needs to be specific there. The full address of the property needs to be listed, the correct amount of money in escrow, and the form needs to be signed by all parties. So the seller name and the buyer name are both identified on the top of the form, and then both the seller and the buyers need to sign the form, whether electronically or in person. It's very important. Escrow accounting will be, they're very strict with this because the escrow guidelines are very strict. So if the form is not filled in correctly and submitted correctly, it will get kicked back and it will delay the process of getting that check done.
Yes.
Normally, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in just to also add, if it's an LLC, if it's a corporation, or if it's anything like that, please make sure the signature sign on, if it's the offer or the purchase and sale, match on the release. So if the top says seller ABC LLC, just make sure below it says ABC LLC and whoever's in charge, chairperson, president, owner, and the signature that's on the document that was executed matches also the release. Again, we are governed by the state of Massachusetts regarding managing escrow. They are very specific on how the form is set up. What makes it real easy is this form and any form we have, once it's in the loop, within seconds, the parties are notified. They can sign off on this and we can get this process managed real quickly. What tends to happen is if you go through paper versions, it then takes forever and takes a longer period of time. So just want to make that note. Thank you, Lisa.
No problem. I find that most of the time the buyer and the seller are anxious to get this transaction that fell through behind them. So the better way, as Jimmy said, is to get it through Dotloop, get it signed off so that they can start thinking about their next transaction or deal. You can use this form on if you're the buy side agent, but you also just want to make sure that you are telling your office admin that this deal fell through. We're not the escrow agent in that regard, but we do want to take it out of our accounting software so that we're not tracking it for closing. Okay. Now we're coming up on on the last slide. So these are just key things we want to just talk about to wrap things up. I feel like sometimes I'm banging the drum, but we're doing it intentionally for you. The checklists are very important. They tell the transaction story. And so we want to make sure that you discipline yourself to do the new listing checklist and the new sale checklist every time, on time, and submit it with the paperwork. Your office administrator is going to be receiving all of your submitted paperwork through Dotloop. So we are in your loop after you submit it. So that is very helpful. Please make sure that you're processing your paperwork through as quickly as possible. We want to make sure that we're avoiding rushing. Rushing leads to errors and mistakes. And I don't know about you, but it seems like once a specific deal gets behind the 8 ball, then nothing seems to go right from the rest of the deal. So it's better karma if we do things on time. Just a quick note for your office admin, they'll appreciate me saying that the marketing requests with the photos should go into the office by Wednesday. That's how most offices will ask for the marketing requests. And the photos are really important to be giving. It doesn't do the marketing any good or the office admin any good if you don't give them the photos until Friday afternoon for a Saturday open house. It simply isn't enough time based on the rest of our workload. So you need to make sure you submit that stuff to us earlier than later. You also want to make sure that you are telling us when you need a sign in the ground or if a sign should be removed. Because we're dealing with a third-party vendor and because they can do things anywhere between 3 business days and a week, things are not in our control in this area other than making the request in a timely fashion, and we want to make sure we get that done efficiently for you. And then lastly, if we've got everything done, if we've worked together well and we've got all of our paperwork done, accounting can start processing your closing within a couple days. And so that's great for you and that's great for everyone. And so that makes, if the agent is happy because they're getting paid, then that makes the office admin happy too. So those are a few of the things that we just want to make sure we are stressing before we close out today.
I do have a question that someone asked earlier during the session. can I find the marketing request form?
So the marketing request form is in the Dotloop template in the Commonwealth forms area. So you could grab it from there and share it and save it to your desktop so that it's more easily accessible. But that's where you're going to find it. And oftentimes the offices will have hard copies as well if you're here in person, you know, if you're in the office in person.
Right. Another question coming in. Who puts together the calendar for the detailed actions in the contract?
That is not something that the office admin has anything to do with. You are the person managing your transaction with the co-broke and the closing attorneys and your client.
Okay. Do we have any? Okay, understood. Good, thank you. Let's see. Any other questions? We did move right along. At this pace, Lisa, the afternoon class will be done in 15 minutes, right? Which is great.
Practice makes perfect.
That's it. That's it. Well, again, I think it's, you know, we're not getting bombarded with questions, which means that you're very thorough, which is a good thing. So I think we are good. Let's see. What's involved in the relocate? What's the difference between, or I would say the question, probably the best way to phrase this is there a difference between a relocation transaction and just a regular transaction when it comes to submitting forms through the process?
So I think the easiest way of answering that is that relocation needs to be involved and has to be aware of the transaction life, where it is in its life, and be given the executed forms. It's just a little bit of an extra piece to make sure that relocation is involved and is informed on where it's going.
And in the checklist, it basically says, is this a relocation? Is this a referral? Once that is checked off, that triggers the whole process of the office communicating with the relocation department, making sure that everyone's on the same page. Yeah.
But the checklist, if you are checking off that it's a relocation or a referral, this shouldn't be the first time that relocation is hearing about it. The office admin should not be the person who's communicating with relocation that this is a referral or a relocation deal. That's something that the agent would be establishing beforehand. I'm trying to think of what else to,
like you said,
it's really just an additional piece when it's a relocation deal. We have to make sure that the relocation world, relocation at Common Moves, is aware of the progress of the transaction.
Correct. And as you mentioned, Lisa, I mean, usually the normal transaction is it's a referral, it's relocation. I have someone that's moving out of state or someone that's moving in state. The first communication is going to happen with the relocation department. But if there is ever a case where someone sends you a referral, you don't notify relocation, they're not aware of it, and it pops up on the form here for the first time, that's where the office would identify it, flag it, and then let relocation know, and then they would get involved. So it does happen sometimes on the back end. You really don't want the worst case scenario is no one ever checks off it's a referral or relocation. It closes, and then the relocation company or referring agency brokerage out of state or down the street is knocking on the door saying, where's my check? And
right,
is aware of it. So that's what we don't want. That's the ultimate nightmare. So communication is key. If you follow the checklist that's in place, it's been designed to make sure it alerts everyone of every piece of the transaction, especially with relocation and referrals.
And it's important for the office admin to communicate with relocation when that information is going into our accounting software. There is certain, relocation is doing certain work on that transaction record in the accounting software in order to make sure that the relocation or referral deal is being properly inputted. So there is communication that is happening between the office admin and the relocation group. But I think I just want to make sure I stress the fact that it's the agent's responsibility to make sure they are saying that this is a relocation deal and they're going through the proper relocation process. We don't, it's never a good idea to identify that late in the game. It just, again, puts us in a situation where we're rushing, and that's how errors happen.
You are correct. Do we have any other questions? Let's see. Okay, I can see people are jumping off right now, so I think we are good. So, Lisa?
They're jumping off or they're falling asleep.
Yeah, either one or the other, or they're being disconnected. Bad service. On that note, Lisa, I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
Information today. As I mentioned, this is a recorded session. Yesterday's was recorded. Today's is going to be recorded. This afternoon is going to be recorded. So if you want to jump on again, if you think of anything between now and this afternoon, feel free to jump in and you can ask a question and we will answer that for you.
I did have a couple of people yesterday ask for the PowerPoint slides. So if anybody would like this presentation, you can send me an email at lisa.mccarthy@commonmoves.com.
Excellent. All right. Thank you again, everyone. And
thank you, Jimmy. Have a good day, everybody.
enjoy. Take care, everyone.